Susan Lyon, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Oh my God, you look so professional.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you not seen the podcast? Come on.
I've seen a little bit, but I mean, you just look like you should be on like CBS or something. Good for you.
Yes. Well, as long as I look the part, because obviously I'm not acting the part because I kept screwing things up with us over the past
Happens to me
month.
too.
Yeah,
I
so
do.
sorry about that.
Yeah.
I figured out what I did, by the way. So I said, are we on for one tomorrow? I had actually thought one was my time, correct? And then it was your time three, and then I flipped it again. I don't know what I'm thinking. Anyway, I'm glad you're here. You made it.
Yes.
It's good to have you. And man, I'm so excited about the great news that we're going to be painting together at the Porch Side of
Yeah.
America conference next year.
Yeah, no, it made me nervous when Kim called. I was like, I had things start spinning, minds like, okay, I have to start practicing.
Oh, are you kidding me? You're going to
How
wipe
many
the floor with me.
months do I have? So I was, the very first thought was, okay, all right, I have a lot of time to practice, but also just thinking about doing something different, like not
Yeah, we got to
just
talk more about that.
a little bit more exciting because there are so many demos there. And so you kind of want to
Yeah.
make it be a demo that people have to see.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. I bet it'll be awesome. I'm really excited about it. I was thrilled when you told me that. But they didn't even bother to ask me. They just asked you. And then I called them up and I'm like, "Is this true? Is this rumor true?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah. Yeah, she said she would do it." I'm like, "Okay, well, thanks for letting me know." Are you doing the face off too?
Well, they kind of got me to do that. I have said no to it a few times because I find it pretty stressful, but I am going to change my perspective. So, when everybody is different, like you or my husband Scott or some other people, when they're doing demos, to them it's nothing. I mean, they wouldn't even think about it, right? It's like nothing. But for me, it's a little bit of like mind preparation, and it's okay, what would I do that I don't have a meltdown? I've gotten better over the years, but I'm determined to have fun, and I am determined to literally talk to people. Because during the face-off, people are so serious. A lot of people wear headphones, or they're just,
Yeah, that's what I do.
painting. I'm not going to do that.
Are you
I am
serious?
going to miss congeniality. I am going to say hi to people. I'm going to talk.
While
I'm
you're
just going to,
painting.
yeah.
Wait a minute, let me get this straight. So you're going to figure out a way to not be nervous, and
Right.
in the same year, you're going to make an effort to talk while painting.
Well,
These
I
are
actually don't have
these are opposing
problems.
forces. I don't know if you realize that, but
Well, I also feel that life's too short, and too many times when you do these public things, there's like too much fear pent up
yeah,
before you do it. And all this fear of being compared to the person next to you, like you don't, because remember, we like get picked out of a hat, so we don't get to choose who we paint, where
mm-mm.
we stand. We don't get to choose who we're standing next to. So I'm just determined that no, I'm going to have much more fun because I really think that those Thursday nights are really all just everyone's so excited. It's the first night. I mean, there's such good electricity. I don't think I'm not going to my point is I'm not going to worry about whatever the outcome is. I think that the happier I'll be, my outcome will reflect it. So that's what
Yeah.
that's what I'm going to say.
Yeah, I'm kind of resolved that no matter how bad mine turns out, I still wake up in the morning, so I don't let it
Right.
get to me too much. I used to. The first time I did a demo, it wasn't even anything like the Porch Society. It was just in my studio. I sent out, this was before social media or anything, and I sent out an email to everyone I could think of and said, "Hey, tell all your friends I'm going to do a demonstration at my studio for $10 or something a person." And I mean, I was right out of college. It took me 8 hours because I was so nervous. And I kid you not, I was like literally like
Yeah.
this with the brush. I was shaking. It was all I could do to even make a brush stroke. I was shaking so bad the entire 8 hours. And the whole time, and what happens is it compounds because you're nervous, and then you get worried that they see that you're nervous, so you get more nervous, and then it just kind of builds and builds. But
Well,
yeah,
I
I'm
can
not that
trust
way
with you.
anymore, thank goodness. But man, the first
You know,
time.
I actually was asked this 2 days ago, like, how do you get over stage fright? How do you get over? And I mean, first of all, it is just doing it many times and living through it, like you said, right?
Right.
You wake up the next day, you live through it. You're not going to die. And I think in general, people are rooting for you, and also they don't see your work the way you see it. You know,
No.
they actually are pretty. Anything is can be impressive just from nothing to something. And I'm just impressed that your very first demo, you're like, you were willing to put yourself through torture that long. It wasn't just like a 2 hour
Oh
demo.
no, it was just me trying to save face is all I was doing. It had nothing to do with willingness. It was like, oh, I can't bomb this thing. Everyone
Right.
sat there for 8 hours. Can you believe that?
I'm back.
I think they thought they were being held prisoner, though. There's no way of telling for sure. I don't know if anyone realized they could leave, but yeah,
Exactly right.
that was
That's fun.
brutal. Yeah.
That's
So,
fun.
what about Scott? Is he doing anything?
Well, so I guess you see like these packages. He has a whole bunch of packages that were going to be shipped off. He's shipping a bunch of stuff off for a show in Oklahoma in October. Now, next year, the good thing about Scott's and my relationship is that in general, whatever he does, I do, and whatever I do, he does. And so I mean, we've been together since I was 19. So for
Wow.
probably like the first 16, 17 years of our relationship, I was the support system. So I would like follow him to workshops, and I would be the one setting up the model and, helping everyone get organized and bringing him lunch. I was being the good wife. And then there was a turning point somewhere around being 36, 37, where I was just like, I have to start saying yes to opportunities. I have to get over that fear of like putting myself out there and not just being Scott's wife. So, and and it's obviously I'm 53, so it's like a long time of me like getting used to like putting myself out there teaching. And so slowly, now he just travels with me and is my support system when I teach. And so he doesn't
Yeah.
really do workshops per se. He just paints along with my workshop. So I always say you get two for one.
Yeah, that's
We
great.
don't get paid
And
once.
now the whole world sees Scott Burdick as Susan Lyon's husband.
Really. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
it's
I
great.
think,
I'm just
yeah,
kidding. Yeah,
perfect.
just tell him I'm kidding. Yeah. Well, as far as the face off goes, there is no way that you should be nervous because everything you do is just gorgeous. I got to show you
Oh
I got to
no.
show the audience this. Here.
Oh,
Do you remember
I have a
this?
fear.
Do you remember this?
I'm scared. Oh, yes, I do remember that. Oh my gosh, and you put a frame on it. That's
Yeah,
so
heck
sweet.
yeah, it's in my studio. So I keep that here as something to aspire to. It's such
Oh,
a,
okay. Now
and you are
stop with
so
the time.
generous. You're so generous. You gave it to me for like a couple $100. It was a real, it was
I was
a treat to
amazed that
have.
you wanted it. I
Oh, I
appreciate
love
it.
it.
I
I love it.
thank
Look
you.
at it every day. So thank you for that. But most of all, thanks for being on the podcast. It's going to be fun to talk more because obviously we know each other, but we never really had a chance, other than that one time at dinner, we've never really had a chance to sit down and talk much. So I'm looking forward to this. And I want to know your backstory. You kind of already told me a little bit that you helped support Scott for so many years. I had no idea. I've only known you as rock star painter, Susan Lyon. That's ever since I've known you, you've been that. So tell me a little bit about your path, even before 19 and marrying Scott. Tell me how you ended up even having the desire, or when you had ended up having the desire to become an artist.
Um, okay, so I grew up just outside Chicago, and I didn't know about being an artist. I was not one of those talented people. My dad
Okay,
had gone to,
that can't be true. You had no natural talent.
no, actually, I still find drawing very difficult, and I think that's why, I don't know, I think that's why I really love teaching. I think that's why I felt that. there was a turning point to where I was like, I have found kind of my purpose, that I love teaching, and I love teaching beginners, and I love like this whole idea of like saying the things that I wish had been said to me. I mean, I did go to an art school. So how this all worked out was in high school, I would say, I don't know, like somewhere around the summer before my senior year, I saw a program on Georgia O'Keeffe, and I mean her work is beautiful and it's and all that, but it was more like her life. It was more an artist's life. The fact that she did what she wanted to do, she expressed herself. There was something so just uniquely different and amazing about her. And I guess I just craved that. I really craved a life of being unique. And so I took some Saturday classes at the Art Institute of Chicago, and it was like for high school students. And they didn't teach you anything though, but it was just really, really fun to go to the same classes. I mean, the rooms that like the college students went to, and being able to go behind the scenes of the museum. And so that was fun. But I didn't know what I didn't have good grades. I was kind of like one of those people that like was a floater. Like I didn't know what I wanted to do. And honest to God, after I graduated high school, I still really didn't know what I wanted to do. I had this little tiny thought, oh, maybe the Art Institute of Chicago, but honestly, you had to have good grades to get in there. And it was like one of those schools that like made you do history and math, and it just, I don't think that was in the cards for me because I was never like academic or a book learner. So one day, my dad literally, I have a vision. You know how these important moments in your life, they're seared into your brain. And so I remember vividly being upstairs and my dad coming home and like walking upstairs and saying, oh, I signed you up for summer courses at the American Academy of Art. And I'd never heard of it. And so I was like, oh, okay. And the only reason why all this happened was because he happened to know a teacher that taught like advertising or commercial art or something there. It was a very small associate's degree school. They had like, back then, they don't have it anymore, but like commercial arts, illustration. They had a very small fine art department, watercolor, you know, that type of stuff. But it was really only like a 2 or 3 year school. There was no academics at all. And I just remember him signing me up for it, and I was like petrified, but I'm like, okay. So for
Okay,
like,
but why would your father sign you up for an art school when you don't even have any talent?
because I think maybe I was scared for my future, but also I had been going to Saturday classes at the Art Institute.
Yeah, but
The
still, I mean, my parents, I think you did have natural talent. I think you're being humble, but I'm gonna take your word for it. Assume you didn't. I did have natural talent, and my parents were like, "No, you're not going to art school. That's, there's no way. Artist isn't a real career. You got to get a job, blah, 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 blah."
I don't think I showed any other promise. Well, okay, so I did not have any talent. In fact, when I thought I was going to go to this school, then I thought, I mean, I'm old, right? So when I first started, they still had keyline pay stuff. It was phasing out, but they still had that whole thing of like working for magazines, like doing kind of graphic-y stuff. And that's kind of what I thought I would do. And I would just go to the school, hopefully learn that. I could still live at home. So, I mean, we lived close enough so I could live at home, just take the train and go to the American Academy. And, you know, but it was apparent, like when I first started doing these summer classes, they had you do fundamentals. And the school was based on that book, Creative Illustration, Andrew Loomis. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure you.
Of course, yeah.
So Andrew Loomis had taught there, like in the 40s, 30s,
Wow.
40s. So this whole school was kind of based on this book. So each chapter in fundamentals, it would be a month, and then another chapter, another month. And so you'd have fundamentals in the morning, and then in the afternoon, you'd have life drawing. And my fundamentals teacher just wasn't the friendliest. He just was one of those guys that, someone like me, I can see it. I mean, I can see a little ridiculous young blonde girl coming in, not knowing anything. I mean, maybe you wouldn't spend much time trying to like help her out. And then life drawing was this grandfather kind of Mr. Rogers teacher that was just, you just gravitated towards because of his gentle energy and nature. And so within 2 weeks, I was like, I want to be a fine artist, not having any, talent or understanding. I also was privileged in a way that I didn't have to work. So, I mean, I could live at home, I could take the L into school. I didn't have those stresses of like, having to have a job at night and like, just support myself. So I started in fine art, but Mr. Parks, all he would talk about was Richard Schmid and Scott Burdick and Daniel
Mm.
Guzik and Rose Franson and Rommel de la Torre. And so there was this group of artists and, Clayton Beck, there was this group of artists that painted together and would have shows together around Chicago. And it was this dream. I mean, it was like, holy cow, these golden people that somehow like are doing this dreamlike thing of like doing art and selling it. So, but I mean, I was like literally like just in school but I would go to their shows.
But
So
just to put in perspective, for those who don't know, correct me if I'm wrong, but most of these artists were only in their 20s when they're talking about,
yeah,
right?
I mean,
So these aren't seasoned
God,
artists. They must have just been young and on their way. And
well, Richard was this like mentor.
well,
So
he was
Richard,
old, obviously, but yeah,
he was actually older than me now. He was probably, yeah, he was in his early to mid 50s when he first met them.
right.
And Scott was probably 1920 when he first met him. And Rose and Dan were maybe just a few years older than Scott. And Nancy was in her 30s, but she was just getting kind of into art. So she was still new. And they all just hang on together, especially Scott and Nancy were just like best friends for like 5 years, just going to school and painting and going to the palette and chisel. And they met Richard and then they would just paint with him. And because of him, because he had this life of being able to sell and go into galleries, he took them under his wing, which is like a miracle. I mean, really it is, especially back then. So this is like the late 80s. And where, selling art is, something that, before the internet, like how do you even do it? Where are galleries? What's happening? And he would introduce them to galleries that he was in and people would come do magazine articles on him and then because of that he would introduce the magazines to these young artists and so I mean it was I think back and I was like such a gift and so when I was in school I just I heard about them because they all painted at this art club which is about just 2 miles from the school and I would go to their openings and how it really all started was because I'd gone to some of their openings and I told my dad, I said, you should buy a Scott Burdick painting because he's going to be famous. And
I
so
love this story.
that's a fun story. And so because he loved art. He liked art and he would even come and buy stuff from my teacher. So like Irving Shapiro was a very kind of well-known watercolorist and was the president of the school. And I mean, I remember Irving doing a demo and I'm saying, Dad, you should buy that demo, So he was buying things, but these things were all inexpensive. I mean, they're not like thousands of dollars or hundreds of dollars. So when I said, you got to buy Scott Burdick, he went to the Palette and Chisel for some Christmas show and gave me this painting for Christmas. And we still have it. And it's a story we show in our living room. I go, this is the painting that I got. And so
Wait, so Scott ended up getting it back by marrying you.
I know.
It's all part of his master plan.
That's so funny. I'm like, he would take it down if it was up to him, but I'm like, no, we have to keep it up. And so I was in school and I was such a beginner, but there was this really pretty girl who was a student also, and her name was Jody. And she was talking about the fact that she was posing at the Palette and Chisel, just portrait stuff, but she was posing there. And of course, like my antenna went up. I'm like, how do you get to do that? Like, how do you get to pose at the Palette and Chisel and meet these people? And she said, why don't you just show up one day while I'm posing and I'll introduce you? And I mean, it was such a big deal. I got all dressed up and my parents drove me down. You curled my hair and wore fancy clothes and I was so nervous to walk. So the Palette and Chisel is an old brownstone in Chicago, and um, it's in the Gold Coast. So it's like a a building that's historical, and so it has gallery stuff on the first floor, and then second floor like studios, and the third floor is this like ballroom that is turned into a art studio. And I just remember walking up there, and I remember my heart beating, and I was like, in a way, I kind of felt like my spirit knew my life was going to change forever. I mean, like I could feel the tingling of like something exciting is about to happen to
No
me. And
way.
so
That's awesome.
I mean, I think we all sometimes know that in retrospect, when you really know that like all of a sudden your life is going to change.
Hmm.
And the moment I walk up there on break, and I see Jody, my friend, and she comes and I come up to her, and she introduces me to Scott, because Scott was the monitor. And the first thing out of his mouth was, "Oh, you should post for us." And I'm this like 19, completely immature girl. I just started to like scream. I was like, I said, I have one of your paintings. Oh my God. And so, it was just too goofy. And so he went and got me signed up on the calendar. And I was so sad that it wasn't like tomorrow. Like, can I post tomorrow? But and so anyway, so it was funny because Scott went up to Nancy after I had gone downstairs, and he said, "Oh, that girl that was just up here, she's gonna post for us." And Nancy said to Scott, "Oh, you mean that girl?" So he tells everyone that that's the first thing she said to
Wait a minute.
him,
Wait. You have to say that out loud because no one can hear it.
because she talks very quiet.
Yeah.
And she goes, "Oh, that girl that you're going to fall in love with and marry." So,
That is gold. Yeah, you got to remember it's a podcast, so we got to be able to hear it.
I'm not supposed to use
She
sign
mouthed
language.
it out for the audience. She mouthed it out. That is gold. So, do you think that she sensed that he had a crush on you, or do you think she planted a seed?
I think that possibly, maybe it would be funny to be an adult and see us meeting for the first time, or when any, two people, and probably because I started to like just screech. I mean, I literally, probably everyone just looked, like, what is going, who's that? And me just being so happy, and then Scott just being happy that I was going to pose, and then me telling him I had his painting, so he probably lit up. And so I bet you if people were witnessing it, it probably would be ridiculous and you'd probably want to gag. So
Oh yeah.
I'm sure it was obvious.
Well, wasn't Scott was in his early 20s, you said at the time?
So I was 19 and he was 21, just a couple months before
Oh
20
yeah.
turning.
He's probably like, this adorable girl thinks I'm awesome. He's probably on cloud nine.
I know, right? I'm like, I'm idol worshiping you.
Yeah.
Yay. Like, I have one of your paintings. You're so perfect, but
Every guy's dream.
I know.
That's a great story. Oh my gosh, I love it. Okay, so then what? So then you posed. How did that lead to you becoming more
Oh,
involved in the art community?
well, I mean, I posed, and then Scott and I just started to talk on break, and we realized that we actually lived very close to each other. He had an apartment just a mile from my parents. So it just was odd because I don't know, like a city, like picture New York, right? Picture Chicago and an art club. People live anywhere from an hour to 2 hours away. So
Right.
it's like you could live 10 minutes away, you could live an hour away, and it's all sides. So when we were talking and we were like, "Oh, gosh, well, I live in Oak Park. Oh, well, I live in Oak Park. Oh, I live here. Oh, I live there. Oh, I go there all the time." And so it was just sort of like
Okay,
this.
Susan, I hate to break it to you, but have you really checked your facts? Are you sure he didn't move after he met you to
No,
Oak Park?
no, he had had an apartment.
I
His
know I'm
parents
teasing.
just slightly north. I mean, just not far enough. But he went and got an apartment because he was very successful even in school. So,
Yeah.
I mean, he was a hard worker. He support himself. He got a scholarship and he had to pay his way through school. And he took every job that was on the job board. He did every commission. and he painted like morning till night. So he was a very, very hard worker. So, and I joke that he like was false advertising. When I first met him, I'm like, oh my God, this guy all the time, and he's just gonna make so much money. And then I'm like, Scott, why aren't you like make some money? Go make some money. Go out to the studios. Come on. Remember, there's money to be made, and so it's a joke, but it's like, he's so hungry in the beginning.
That's funny. Yeah, that happens with you with age. Okay, so you started dating him, and then is there anything in between there and you being, as you put it, the supportive wife for 17 years? I mean, how did you transition from that to becoming the Susan Lyon we all know and whose work we follow?
Oh, well, I mean, honestly, probably from our first time we met to our first date a couple weeks later, we were like inseparable. He was my first boyfriend, and we moved in a couple years later. And then because of him, which was because of Richard, like, I mean, I did not make a lot of money at all, but I was at least able to do very, simple little paintings, simple little drawings, and sell them for very little. And I would just sell them at the same shows or galleries that Scott was in. So we just, we were just working artists trying to make money every month to pay the rent. And it was just month by month. And, Scott would do commissions, but Scott would do workshops. So, as an artist, workshops were always helpful to him. So that's, where I would help him out. But we moved. So, we lived in Chicago in apartments for about 5 years. And then we moved down to North Carolina because, we just didn't want to have that much overhead, and we wanted to be able to travel. I think probably the one thing that Scott and I have in common is the fact that we have travel lust. Like
Hmm.
we like want to like travel and see other cultures, and we are figurative people. We're figurative painters. So the idea of painting people that don't look like us, well, is probably more exciting to us. Like we'll seek that out. So we needed to live in a place that was less expensive, that we didn't have to worry about like, okay, oh my gosh, are we going to sell a painting this month? We needed to have it be much lower. So we moved to North Carolina, honestly, just because I heard on the radio that North Carolina was a good place to retire. This is me at like 25, 26. I'm like, I had no idea, about North Carolina at all. But we took a trip down here, drove around, looked for different towns, and finally found Winston-Salem. And it's really, you wonder how life guides you. It was like me listening to this radio program. And then once we came down here, it was the realtor who just wouldn't give up and just kept sending us things. And I just think, I'm always trying to think of it from someone else's perspective. So I'm 25, 26, and we're coming down and like, oh, we want to buy a house, like, and that someone took us seriously, and that this realtor like wined and dined us. I mean, I don't even drink, but just took us around to restaurants and showed us everything. And we didn't find anything on the first one around, but then when we went back to Chicago, he kept sending us stuff. I thought, oh my God, at my age now, like, could you imagine being that like much of a person to pursue like a silly girl who lives in Chicago who's 25 that would actually buy a house from you? But he kept sending us stuff, and then we decided to come back down. And then we found out Maya Angelou had lived here in this town, and I loved Maya Angelou. And then we found out that the realtor, once I told him that, I said, well, I've always loved Maya Angelou, and we found out that she lives here. So I thought, well, if she can live here, I can live here. And he goes, well, Maya Angelou bought my childhood home. And it's like,
What?
how I mean, how life does this to you?
That's
So you
insanity.
go, okay. I mean, it was like, oh, I guess then this is the place that we should move to. Don't
Holy
know
cow.
anybody.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, it seems like your life was guided on some level.
I mean, you see it when you look back sometimes, yeah. And because I mean, in life, nothing is ever linear.
Right.
Nothing just keeps going up. So, I mean, there's lots of ups and downs in art for sure.
Hmm.
And, you know, So like I was joking even about like, Scott, like when I first saw him, he just seemed to be so successful and so just like, on the rise. But then, life happens. Like you go through different things and, ups and downs, things you have to hurdle over, and stuff. And it's just, keeping persevering and like just keeping the path, just every day, just getting up and like doing art and just and not letting things that go wrong like get you down, because being gallery artists is nothing is ever was, set in stone. So you could, or you could never sell another painting again. The gallery that was selling for you might not be in business tomorrow because that gallery, the person sold it, or maybe they had a divorce, or this or that happens. And so you're always having to like reinvent yourself. You're always having to like figure out, well, what do I do next? How do I keep this going? Like what makes me happy? And but you know this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're in, on some level, I've thought a lot about this. I've got a whole list of married artists, couples who are both artists that eventually I want to do a series where I get people like you and Scott on together. I think that'd be really interesting to talk about your stories. But I've always been curious about it because I'm not married to an artist.
Mm.
And, I feel for my spouse because I think artists can be really hard to live with. And one of the things that makes me difficult to live with is that constant feeling that you just described, that you constantly have to be ahead of it and reinventing yourself,
Mhm.
because it feels like, and maybe I'm pushing this a little further than you would, but for me personally, it feels like if you're not constantly looking for the next opportunity, then things could run out and it could all end. So it's difficult to stop working, I guess is what I'm getting at. Like to
Oh,
take a break,
yeah.
and that's what's so challenging, at least for my spouse. It's like, can you stop working? Like, well, yeah, well, we might starve if I do. So, I mean, we're doing
Well,
fine. We're doing fine. But there's that voice in the back of your
your
head that's
mental
like, yeah, it's a mental thing. It's like, but Jen's like, but we have plenty. And I'm like, yeah, but that could end tomorrow, Jen. You don't understand. That could end tomorrow.
right. Well, and the fact that you are probably are the main supporters, so your
I
kids, and you
am,
have to
yeah.
we moved to North Carolina specifically so that we would never, ever, ever have to think that way. Now, sometimes it's good or bad because I think that artists that do have that, they have to do something, it makes them push, it makes somehow
Good motivator.
it's a good motivator, but I don't know if that would be how Scott and I would work best. Some people it works for, and I'm not sure if that would work best for us. But I agree with you completely. There's with social media, there's always this sense that everybody, you see people saying they had a sellout show or this or that, and you then it's hard not to compare. It's hard
Right.
not to go, wow, gosh, it's really, it takes a lot of like I guess just groundedness. And, we don't have kids and we live here so that we wouldn't have that overhead. And I mean, so I guess there's a little bit of wiggle room, but I know what you're saying because whenever I talk with my friends about this idea that as artists, we want to create and we want to be visionaries and we want to do something that makes our heart beat faster. And every single one of us will say, I want time or I wish that I could experiment. I wish I had time, but I have so many commitments. I've booked myself up or I have this and that. And I know that this particular show won't want my experiments, right? They'll want the things that they wanted in the past. And so it's a recurring conversation that we all say over and over again that then sometimes we get really sad when we don't live up to it, right? 3 years later, gosh, remember when I said I wish I could take time off to experiment and somehow I just never did. And I have to say, and I'm meaning this just with all like 100% honesty, that COVID was probably the best catalyst in my life because
Hmm.
it's everyone it fits differently, but I'm looking at the silver lining. And of course, there was a lot of fear. Oh my gosh, I was literally having an art opening on March. Everything shut down.
$2020.
I think our opening was supposed to be March 14th, 2020, and it was canceled. And was traveling. I was in Denver and it had canceled and nothing. And, I couldn't even go in the gallery. I had to fly home it was like, and the fear with all the news, like building up to it was just like, wait, is the world come to an end? I felt
Oh, so glad that's over.
right? But there's like, and then all of a sudden, one by one, every single thing canceled. 4 workshops, shows, opportunities, all these things that you had kind of were counting on were gone. And it was like just out of the blue, I just said, well, okay, well, I'm just going to start a Patreon, not knowing at all how to do it. I just did it on my phone. I had no idea how to film myself. I had no idea how to do anything. I had no idea how to upload, and I made tons of mistakes. And then I'm going to start just teaching. I'm going to start making like instructional videos, doing like online classes, doing like personal mentoring, and being that person that, gosh, what if I'd had me when I was 22, 23 years old? All the things that I wish. Now, people will say, well, didn't you have Scott? Well, Scott was also extremely young and he was trying to figure himself out. And we paint completely different.
Yeah,
So
you do.
there were times when I would ask Scott, like, well, what do you think of this or something? And we're just different, like he would say things. He'd be like, well, I think maybe you need some like thicker strokes here, or maybe, and that just didn't resonate with me. It just didn't. Like I needed more concrete. I needed not just like put thick strokes there. And so what wound up is that we just literally paint separately. It's
Yeah, don't you have 2 separate buildings even?
yeah. So at my house here, I do have a studio in the back, and they're 2 separate, and Scott has a studio. And now I also rent a place about a half hour away in a
Half hour.
It's not bad. It's country roads, so it's not bad. And I love it.
But
First of
why
all,
do you drive when you have a studio right in your backyard?
everyone says that. So it wasn't up until literally, I'm going to say 2 or 3 weeks ago, did we actually have internet.
Oh, are you
Now,
serious?
okay, we had internet, but we could not be on our phone and watch Netflix at the same time.
Oh, that's
And
brutal.
we could not download, upload anything. So in all honesty, I needed a studio downtown to also be able to have groups. I like painting and drawing, with friends. So to have like model sessions and have it be more convenient for people and have models down there and to have better internet.
This episode is brought to you in part by Rosemary Brushes. If you're one of my listeners who's a professional artist, you're already using Rosemary brushes. But for the rest of you, come on. Take your work a little more seriously. Stop buying the other brands. It's just not worth it. Every now and then you may get lucky and buy a good brush from another brand, but use the brand that professionals like myself are using. Go to rosemaryandco.com, link in the description or the show notes, and get yourself some quality brushes before your next painting.
But luckily, oh my God, I cannot believe we actually have internet now, which is mind blowing. But so I love it. I love getting up and going to work, because if I'm home, I'll procrastinate. I will watch TV, I'll play with my cats, and I like driving.
I'm laughing just because of how you had said that at some point. I don't remember where we were, but you're like, I can just sit and watch cat YouTube videos or cats on Instagram all day long. And then I'm looking at your portfolio and seeing all these cat portraits, and it's just cracking me up. You're such a cat lady.
Those are actually all few of my I need to paint more kitties. So, but I love driving to downtown, and then I love being there and knowing that, yeah, it feels like a job. It doesn't feel like a hobby. It doesn't feel like, I feel like I'm here, I can always go home if whatever, but like, I'm here for a certain amount of time. And then on the drive home, what I find is even more important because there have been times when I'm home, I'm sitting in the living room, and Scott will come in, and I can tell he is still in frustration mode. I can tell that it hit the walk from his studio into the house is just not far enough, right? It's like
Mm,
he's still a little zoned out. He's still kind of like shell shocked or just in whatever painting. You know how you just paint to a point of exhaustion to where you're like, I'm over it. And I can just see it, and so for me, I have that half hour of just having music or just having silence and just it's like a transition to being like whatever was in my studio, good or bad or indifferent, it's like I'm different. And when I get home, I'm home and there's like a portal. I drive
yeah.
through the portal.
Yeah. It's interesting because I find, other than the people, which is obviously a very important element, um, but my studio is so much my space because I also have a studio away from home,
Hmm.
that home is literally nothing but where I put my family and my underwear and my toothbrush. Like, I mean, everything is at the studio.
Right.
And which is which I find, it makes me wonder if maybe I need to be working back at home. But I actually I left to have a studio away from home for all the reasons you're talking about. So I totally get what you're saying, particularly the procrastination one, where
Hmm.
you just get distracted by something, and the next thing you know, you've wasted an hour and a half, and you should have been working or whatever. Um, so anyway, I just wonder about that. I mean, I guess it's probably our lives are so different because you are married to an artist, you don't have kids, and you live in North Carolina in the mountains and whatnot. But do you find that you leave a piece of you back at the studio, or can you bring your whole self back home?
I am pretty good about compartmentalizing when it deals with that. Um, Yeah, I am different than Scott. Like he has extreme highs and extreme lows. And like he's the one who's like I'm more of a turtle and he's more of a hare. So I'm the one that can like regulate myself. And that's also why I like teaching workshops. I mean, I can regulate myself. And I think I'm a little bit of an extrovert. So to be honest with you, Monday is the hardest part of the workshop because you're so excited and you're meeting everyone, by Friday, I have more energy than I have on Monday. And I don't want anyone to go home. And I'm like, let's just, if we could just keep doing this. And Scott is different. Scott, he can't regulate his output of energy. So he like will wear himself out. And that's just, I think we're just kind of built certain ways. So for me, I can leave my studio self in my studio and having that half hour helps so much because I think if I only had a minute to walk back in, I don't know if that's enough time because possibly I might think, gosh, maybe I should walk back out and see, oh, should I go do that? Oh, should I go do that? So yeah.
Hmm,
So
that's
yeah.
great. You're lucky. That's good that you have that ability to regulate yourself that way. I'm like Scott in workshops. I'm exhausted by Friday because I'm trying to do everything on Monday, and then by Friday I just want to pass out. So
Yeah.
I'm the same way. I can relate to him. Okay, so you had mentioned that people say to you, "Well, you had Scott," and you're like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, but we're different." And that's the other question, and maybe this is for that series where we talk about couples. So I just want to skim over this. I don't want to dwell on the relationship right now. Maybe you could just tell me, how much of a teacher was he for you? What did you gain from living with an artist, and how did it affect your career?
Well, that's a great question because I think, as I mentioned early on, I was not someone who was book smart. Like I did not get grades in school because I just honestly my family also wasn't the type of family that pushed homework or it was very loosey goosey, let's just say. And what I really learned from Scott was work ethic. What I really learned was I had no idea what it looked like to have someone work hard and be so passionate. it wasn't in my surroundings. Like I just didn't have no one in my life that emulated that. So even when we first started to date, like say we would see each other and we would go out to see a movie on a Saturday afternoon, or we would do something, we'd hang out. Well, when he went home, like say at like 7 o'clock at night, he would start a painting.
You're
I
kidding
mean,
me. That's crazy.
so, but I mean, he was also very young, remember? But
Yeah, that's true.
there was just this energy, this like desire, this, um, I just had never been around that. So seeing that really helped me. Like I still had to get over habits. I still had to like, I had all these tendencies, but just the idea of like day in, day out, and also just his passion for it. And one thing I also just learned from people like him, but like Richard Schmid is like, I remember the first time I went to Richard Schmid's house. He lived in Evanston, which is really close to Chicago. And walking into his house, it was like a revelation because he lived in this beautiful little Victorian house. Every single room was about art. So a lot of people compartmentalize and they have a studio. And then in their house, it is picture perfect house. There's nothing about art. But when you walked into Richard's house in the living room, you saw first of all, he had paintings everywhere, but when you look at all of Richard's work, you saw that he posed a model in every corner of that room. So all
Hmm.
those paintings, Nancy, everything he did of his children. I mean, every corner of his house was what are those tableaus, or something like you could just put a model in and paint it. Have the couch and all the stuff behind the couch and the table in front. And
You mean the house was, I mean, for lack of a better word, staged in a way that it could be a good
it was,
setup for a painting.
yes, it was how he lived. It was how he saw the world was through an aesthetic eye.
Yeah.
So it was everything. Like he didn't have a dining room table. So when you walked into his living room, then you took a right, those old Victorian houses, you had to walk through the dining room to get into the kitchen, and the dining room was his studio. So you walked right past his palette and his easel and whatever he's painting on, and it was just like every part of his life had to do with art, and he didn't compartmentalize because that was him. Like, so when you're married or have kids, like his kids would just live around it. It was that was like, yes, this was like reminiscent of like that program of George O'Keeffe, that your life, every aspect of your life was art. And it didn't it you didn't like, it wasn't just 9 to 5, and it wasn't just Monday through Friday. It was, yeah, like every vacation was wrapped around art. Every friendship. Like I think about it, I'm like, all of my friends are artists. Like I
Same
don't
here.
even have friends that are dentists, or I don't know, secretaries. I mean, I just only have artists. So I don't know what it's like to just have small talk with people that don't relate to the world through art.
I can't relate to most people. That's how, I mean, I can on a surface level, but I
Yeah.
find that I'm definitely happier being around my people is what I call it. Other artists. Yeah. Well, then what you just said in a way is kind of what I was talking about with leaving the studio. I feel a little bit like Richard Schmidt, where my whole life, it's like every aspect of my life is wrapped up in art in one form or another. It doesn't have to be painting per se, but it's that same personality or
Hmm.
desire for beauty that makes me want to paint, that ends up getting inserted into every area of my life. And that's a little bit about what I'm talking about, and not being able to leave the studio behind, you know,
Right.
and
Yeah.
and just letting your house not be perfect because you live with people, you know, letting your environment, just letting it go a little bit because you have to function in a world with other humans, right?
Yeah.
That's been a personal challenge for me, and that's why I asked that question.
Well, we also joke a lot that we wish we had like an assistant, or I mean, I hate to say it, wife. We wish we had that because our house is very basic. We don't spend a lot of money on furniture or, expensive things because, first of all, we live in the middle of nowhere. But second of all, like our money goes towards, frames and travel and experiences and also just the cushion of not then having that fear of like, well, how are we going to pay our insurance bill? So it's like everything does wrap around it. Like I don't know, like I think about artists that live like in really expensive areas. I mean, and their overhead is just so
Yeah,
high. And
why
then what they
anyone lives in New York, I'll never understand.
or like Los Angeles or places,
Why?
and then they get in this like hamster wheel, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like they make a certain amount of money and then they have a certain amount of possessions and then they have to protect those possessions and they have to,
Yeah.
diversify. And it's like more and more and more and more. And I just could never live like that.
Yeah. And when I
Yeah.
said I have to correct myself, not anyone. Why would anyone live in New York? What I can't understand is why an artist would choose New York, other than of course the museums and stuff. But I don't. I'd rather live 4 hours away and pay less for a house and drive 4 hours every 6 months or 3 months and go to the Met. It's like
Yeah.
crazy expensive to live in those cities. Salt Lake is getting that way too, but fortunately, we've been here long enough that we couldn't afford to live here today. Yeah, a lot of cities are just getting out of control. I don't know how any artist is ever going to survive anymore in a city. It's
Well,
crazy.
I also think the reason why things get so expensive is because people just live above their means and it's not real.
Maybe.
It's not
Seems that
because
way.
an artist should be somebody who it's like freedom, the ability to pivot, the ability to like say, this isn't working. I need to do something else that like is more fulfilling. And once you get into being a factory artist, then sure, like I know how to make money. But my soul won't let me.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, it's like both of us, my Scott and I, we're these people that maybe are a little bit too stubborn, but it's like, sure, I know what I could paint, but it's almost like my hand won't do it. Like, I've done that or a few versions of it, and I will play around with different versions, but I need to experiment. And I think I was starting to talk a little bit about like COVID and how it was just such a blessing for me in many ways because when I decided to start doing like mentoring or online classes, it opened up everything, because you could reach people all over the world, which I love. I feel like I have hundreds of pen pals and I just feel so connected and I could never be alone anymore because there's so many people out there that I can, just talk to, even through Zoom, right? I could talk to someone in New Zealand
I
and just
know.
talk
It's
and
incredible.
and also planning an online class is my favorite thing to do. I love to plan trips. So like I say like I'm going to do an online class in February. I will take 6 months to experiment on the things that I want to teach. So then by the time I get to February, I have all these little lessons, I have all these little videos, and I feel like I'm being subsidized in a way to like get the time to experiment. But then at the end of the rainbow, I then get to share it with people and I then get to like say, oh my gosh, now you're paying me for all this work I did for 6 months. And now it's like, hopefully I'll inspire you. And, and so I just feel like when else would I have even been able to do that? Like, so I don't know.
It's a good time to be alive. I mean, there's so many reasons it's a crappy time to be alive, but when it comes to being able to connect over the internet like we're doing right now, it is such a blessing. I literally just podcast this morning with Daniela Stone in Italy.
You
And
are just too popular and oh my
I'm not
God.
popular. These people are popular. And I'm just a weird stalker who's got a
know.
He's got a microphone.
I mean, it takes a go-getter to get all this going and to be the connector. I mean, that's what I think. It's like, I am so determined now too. Like, I've always used to do little videos on trips, but I am so determined to document, like,
Hmm.
show, like Saturday, Scott and I are driving up to Vermont, and I'm gonna do a workshop in Vermont at the Landgrove Inn, and then we're gonna go stay with Nancy for a few days, and then we're gonna go visit Michael Klein on the way home. And I think, gosh, I'm lucky. I am so lucky, and I'm going to video it and show everybody because I would love it. I would love to, like, could you imagine 30 years ago if somebody was videoing and like showing what someone's studio looked like and what's happening, and being like, wow, we actually got to see that person's studio 30 years ago. Well, that's what I want to, just like you, like that's what I want to
Oh,
do
yeah.
now.
Yeah. I feel like these conversations, I've got them triple backed up. I pay way too much to make sure these conversations are backed up. And
Oh
it's
yeah.
not because I have a sense of self-importance by any stretch. It's because I try not to say too much, but because the people I'm interviewing need to be heard after they're dead. I want this conversation to be heard after you're gone.
I
You
know.
know,
I agree with you.
people
I
need to
agree with
know
you.
about you and this awesome story. It's so great. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question, and this is totally inappropriate, but I want to talk about your financial situation a little bit, and without getting too specific. But
I,
you're able to travel. Obviously, you're full-time painters, both of you, and that's such a blessing that you have that. Besides the things we've already talked about, do you have any things that you believe in or that you do
yeah,
or
that's
that help you to be financially stable so that you can afford to travel and experiment and so on and so forth?
so I think that's a great question. And I think it's so important. And that's kind of what I was talking about. People, it is choices, you know. It's like there are, I mean, people want that excitement of like living in Los Angeles or maybe working for a certain this or a certain that, and it's exciting. But then there's a stress level that comes with it. So Scott and I early on, you grow up with money issues with your parents. Either, no matter what, there's something that you got from your parents, right? And Scott and I had completely the opposite money like mentality, but yet somehow because through that growing up, we both completely agree with what we should do. And
Mm,
that is you only pay cash. So we
same.
have so
Hmm.
we like that's why I knew early on that we needed to get out of the renting. You know, we needed to get out of this like overhead because if we wanted to travel, we just could not live with paying rent in an empty apartment. You know, that we were like not there. So early on, we were like, we've got to be able to like put money towards something that is like, so we did move to North Carolina. We were able to do that because of being self-employed. We don't make a living where we live. So if we lived in Alabama, if we lived in Chicago, we don't make a living there. So it doesn't matter. We might as well live in a cheaper place. And just, getting a house that was inexpensive and a low mortgage. And then we were determined to pay off our mortgage in 7 years. So we paid it
Whoa,
off.
7 years.
Our house
Congratulations.
wasn't expensive, but I mean, we were just determined. So, and then we just never had a balance on our credit card. We've never had if we buy a car, it's straight out. So we don't have that sense of payments. Like there's this like itemization, except for insurance.
Yeah, it's
But
those kinds of things that drive me nuts. Obviously taxes, insurance, the things that even when you're debt free, you still have
right,
bills. That you can't
right.
avoid the bills. Drives me crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
I follow all the same rules. But
yeah.
just for those who, just to clarify, for those 17, 18, we do have a little bit of an audience that's younger.
Mhm.
When you say cash, do you mean literally cash or putting things on credit cards and paying it off every month?
Yeah. No, I mean literally paying it off every month.
Okay,
And credit card I have is airline miles.
right.
So every time I buy, it always I get so many free airline miles a year. And so that's what I mean by cash. My dad
Yeah.
literally cash.
Yeah, because you can't
And
do that in this day and age. I mean, like, it's hard enough to get a loan when you're self-employed and you're trying to write everything off so you pay as few taxes as possible. If you're not using credit cards, you're toast. You're not going to have a credit score.
so that's what I mean
Yeah,
too. I just
yeah.
mean, I also mean just like living below your means. So when Scott and I moved in with each other, we lived in a neighborhood in Chicago that was very working class. We didn't live in the ritzy part of Chicago. And then it's like we always knew we could pay our rent. And I guess that's just the mentality. And it's hard, when you see other people having more than you to be like, well, they live in they have that car, or they live in that neighborhood. And I don't know, we just never felt that way. Yes, you know what it was too? I think it was the fact that, I mean, I hardly made any money. I literally was just making enough money probably for groceries. I mean, we just lived check to check, but and but it was always like when we were so young and we were poor and we would never go out to eat and we would, everything was like I never buy clothes. It was just this exciting of being an artist. I think what nourished us or what kept us like kind of knew that we were lucky was every single adult around us said, "Aren't you guys lucky?" Every single person was like, I wish I could have done that when
Hmm.
I wish I could live a life of an artist. And so we were constantly being reaffirmed that, yeah, you know what? Maybe we don't have a lot of material stuff, or maybe we don't have expensive stuff, but we kind of have what's important. We have this freedom that every day we wake up and we get to create. We literally get to create whatever we want every single day. And you don't realize what a luxury that is. And sometimes it's layers. It takes years to like appreciate that and to like, every year it's a little bit more of appreciation and a little bit more of appreciation. So, yeah, I get it when, someone who was in their 50s looking at me when I'm 22 and looking at me with rose-colored glasses, who's poor and living, getting clothes from Salvation Army and them just being like, gosh, what an exciting life you have. And so that's how I saw myself was
Hmm.
like, I have an exciting life because everyone around me is telling me I have one.
I've been doing Jeff's online mentorship program for about a year now, and it is awesome. Everything is online, super streamlined. If you can be there, I mean, you have the ability to talk to him once a week and he can review your work and help you. If you can't be there, it's pre-recorded. You can go back and even re-watch things if you missed something during class or couldn't be there. So the online portion of it is almost better than real life because you can always go back to it, which is awesome. The demos are recorded. It's just like all available whenever you need it. And I'm a stay-at-home mom of 4 and my time is limited and it's also very interrupted. And so to be able to go back has been clutch for me. And you get to work with Jeff Hine, who's awesome. He's tough. The assignments are simple, but difficult, and they're difficult to make us all better. And he's able to give us these assignments, coach us through it, help us stay excited to progress. And so it's just been a great experience. I am so grateful that he has been willing to take time away from his own art to offer all of us to have it. So if you're thinking about doing it, it's amazing.
To learn more about how you could have me as a personal mentor, check out the link to heineatelier.com in the show notes or video description. Yeah. Yeah, you are 100% mirroring my approach and my wife's approach. In fact, when I was going to school, I remember I had this job at a woodworking place. I was turning legs and whatnot. And the guys would all go out to lunch every day. And they would, of course, invite me to lunch. And I'd always turn them down because I didn't have the money for lunch. And they're like, we're just going to like McDonald's or something. Just do the 99-cent menu. I'm like, you don't understand. I don't have 99 cents. And at the time, my wife was also working, but between the two of us, we were just barely getting through school and paying our rent and everything
Yeah.
and paying car payments and whatnot, because we had to have a car. So what happened when we started making money, when I started making money, all of a sudden we got a significant income on top of what we were used to. We just kept the same lifestyle. And this is what people don't do. And we just kept the same lifestyle until we had a couple years income in the bank that we could live on. And from that day, for 20 years, we've had financial freedom. I've never had to or feel like I can't experiment with my paintings. I've never felt like pressure to paint something I didn't want to paint. Never had to worry. But you're spot on when you say, or at least I suspect you're spot on when you say that that we're just living beyond our means. I mean, we as in people in general are just living beyond our means to have all these nice things.
Yeah. Well, I think it's because like everyone needs a creative outlet. Everyone needs reason to like explore your inner self. Either it's gardening, cooking, fashion, whatever. I'm making things, I mean. And it's like, if you don't have that, of course you're going to rely on, we all crave new. We all crave this sort of excitement of like what's around the corner, and so if you don't have like something that's already that you can work at every day, then you're gonna want to like fill that hole with
toys.
Yeah.
Essentially
jewelry.
toys. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so true. I'm not going to say who to embarrass anyone on the podcast. I was just talking to someone close to me in my life. They were complaining about their spouse and how, not complaining, but venting about how their spouse keeps buying toys. And I said, he's got a job he hates. Like, that's why he buys toys. He comes home on the weekends and it's his only relief and he buys toys. I don't buy toys because I don't need toys. I'm fulfilled. Every day of my life is fulfilling. So just to empathize with this poor man who's just trying to find an ounce of happiness in his life,
Well, I mean, for you and me, every artist, our addiction are art supplies, probably.
Oh, that's the truth. For me, tools and art supplies. Yeah.
I am embarrassed at how many brushes I have. I mean, it's like, it's a sickness, and it is something that I honestly wouldn't want to show people. Be that I'm like I would be like, it would like make me feel very dirty.
But you only have artist friends, so we all understand. We're all sick.
Still though, me, trying to be my highest self, like I'm even like sorting brushes, going, which brushes can I give away? Because somehow, because I love old brushes, so I tend not to just throw them out, like I have brushes from 15, 20 years ago. So I
just put them in a different container. Once they get old, and it's funny because a year later, this just happened. I've got this container of old, quote unquote, unusable brushes. And then just recently, I'm going through there just to use a brush to put wood glue on something, because that's what I use them for random things. And then I'm like, ooh, there's a couple brushes. I don't know how they made it in here. These would make great brush strokes. So I take them out of the old trashy container and put them back in my normal container.
Us too. Scott loves early brushes. People laugh.
I know. It's so bizarre. I don't know why they weren't sufficient before, but now all of a sudden they're a treasure again. They just came out of hell into heaven.
Just like food or something. Like certain times I'm like so into a brush and I go, I'm not really into those brushes.
Yeah.
And like you said, like a couple of years later, you go, then you see those brushes again. You're like, where have you been all these years? Oh my God, I would have been better if you had been there.
I wish I could see your brush collection. I want to know if it's actually bigger than my brush collection. I see, because I also have that disease where I go to the art supply store just to pick up one brush because I'm out of that one brush and I might want one or two of them. And I come home with $800 worth of brushes. And I'm like, what the crap am I doing?
Art stores are Achilles heel for sure. And
It's pretty bad. Okay. Well, all right. So let's talk a little bit more about your art. Okay. In fact, let's pull it up. Let's pull up your website.
Oh, okay.
One of the things that I absolutely love about your work, you said you couldn't draw. I just don't get it, because look at this of Divya. Divya is a fellow artist and I'm assuming friend of yours, friend of mine. And you nailed that likeness. And you're telling me that You
Well,
have,
I mean, okay, so I'm better at drawing now than when I started for sure.
obviously, we all are, right?
But a lot of times, getting true likenesses does take me a while. I think people are just we all have different talents. Some people are really good at spatial, like they're able good at seeing shapes. Some people are really good at seeing value. Um, and for me, it's like it takes me a while to get there. Like it's not like, an hour thing. It's like it's a multiple going in there and tweaking and tweaking. And for me too, like every single piece I have to turn upside down because my brain is not seeing things in alignment correctly. So I have to turn everything upside down. And I work from black and white. So if I'm working from a reference, it's always black and white because I just, I don't know if it's like, it's not like a color blindness thing. It's like I literally have a very hard time duplicating value.
You
So
mean from color, bringing value from
color,
color to black and white.
and even for black and white, like I find that I put things in and I somehow it's like everybody, and I teach, I'm sure you do too, right? There are things that as a teacher you hear coming out of your mouth over and over again, and it's because it's the things that we see in our own work. And so the thing that I emphasize mainly with students is like keeping your lights clean, keeping the halftones in the light, because I find that my habit is whenever I go back to my work the next day or I'm looking at stuff, I'm like, how did those halftones get so dark? Like what
Oh,
happened?
you know what? This
You
is
know, what-
why I love talking to people like you, a great artist like you, because I know that principle instinctively, but I've never heard it put that way. I've never heard it. And because I know I do the same thing on occasion where my halftones get a little too dark. But I know the principle that you have to separate the light side from the dark side, make sure the light side stays in the lights, the dark stays in the darks. But the way you phrased it makes it so clear. Keep your lights clean. I love that. And I'm going to use it from now on. I hope you don't mind.
no, good. And I get that from, of all places, creative illustration,
Oh,
the book.
really? I have that book. I guess I need to read more carefully.
Because there's a chapter, go to the chapter sort of towards the end of where he quotes Howard Pyle. So Howard Pyle was a very famous teacher, and he was obviously a very strict teacher because the way he would phrase things, you could tell people were probably pretty scared of him. But he was very deliberate about keeping halftones in the light, and that differentiated between amateurs and professionals. And the way he would phrase things were just so funny, but like, really, I guess, just harsh. But he would say, if you see color, if you see form, if you see texture, anything that you see is in the light. And usually the halftones are what's showing you the color, texture, form, all that. So it's just that mind, okay, no matter what, halftones are in the light. So they have to be like value 4 or to 1. To me, so 1 is my highest highlight, 10 is my darkest accent, and 5 is that middle where it can go slightly, but I consider 5 to be shade. So 4. So my halftones have to be 4 or above. And even though I know this mentally, I still somehow through painting, somehow I fall asleep a little bit during the process. And recently I've been even going, no halftones, get rid of them. Because there is something about the human mind. And the more you look at someone like Sargent, he didn't even paint halftones. It's like his halftones are so in the light, there are no halftones. And so I am just like pushing that. I'm just saying if
Yeah.
we can go more simple, less modeling, less halftone, then it's going to be even more clear. And so I'm just kind of been on this like crusade. You know what? Because everybody wants to kind of push back and go, but I see that color, I see this, I see that. And they're just not analyzing it enough because they're overseeing it. They're not squinting, they're not comparing, because it's not just all about looking in one spot. It literally is about judging two values right next to each other, but then it's slightly defocusing, or some people just defocus, some people squint, or like they look through their eyelashes, and it's moving the eye. It's like saying, what is the comparison? It's not just this point. It's this point compared to that point, compared to this point, compared to that point. And the comparing is what goes out the window. So, we were taught in school is
You mean
squint.
it goes out the window unnecessarily? It shouldn't go out the window, you're suggesting.
It shouldn't go out the
Okay,
window
right.
because what happens is people only focus on where they're painting. So
Right, I know.
if they're painting the nose, that's the only thing they're thinking about. If they're painting the ear, that's the only thing they're thinking about. So the ear becomes full value, the neck becomes full value, the background becomes full value. And so it's like they're just moving to one place and then zoning in, and not the idea of a bullseye, a center of interest, this fact of like that you as an artist are telling a story. You are not a photograph. So you are saying, this is what I want you to look at right here. And so everything else is a supporting character. So that collarbone, the color or the whatever is going down the arm, or the little bit of information right here, if like you see a tiny bit of background between the hair, this goes out of focus. It's stepping from like seeing everything to seeing only what the poetry is. And that's a huge leap for people. It
Yeah.
takes a lot.
I'm still working on that. I mean, that to me is a huge part of where I feel like the art of
Yeah.
making paintings lies. Because pure observation is a craft. You just look at the thing, make the thing again. To me, that seems like a craft. But then once you can bring in what you've described, where you find your focus and then everything else supports it, and it's almost like directing a play. In other words, you're directing your attention around the image. That's a huge part of where the art lies, and that's the hard part. That's the hardest part. Especially once you know how to draw and paint, at least to some degree. When you're learning to draw and paint, that seems like the hardest part. But yeah,
Right. And that's why it's difficult, because also there is a point where just getting something to look like a face and, to be able to draw or paint at the same time is a feat, especially when you have a time crunch, right? It's
Right.
like it is daunting. But then how do you get something from looking academic to something that's looking aspirational? And, to me, it doesn't always just happen like immediately. Like sometimes I do have to like almost kind of work through everything, figure it out, because like, yeah, it's a struggle, like sometimes it's just hard trying to figure out how to, get this shape, how you want it to be in relationship, and how, sometimes things do get a little bit overworked. And then the process for me is, once I've kind of got it to that 95%, then it's like, okay, how do I take away? And, and then I'm asking myself questions like, what is distracting? And so there's all different types of tricks. I mean, the trick of turning things upside down. Some people look at things in mirrors. Sometimes it's incredibly helpful to literally take a photograph of your painting or drawing, because the camera is a magician. The camera will like give you just the most glaring edge, the most glaring something that is like a miss. Because I find just like with like your nose or your mouth, our eyes become desensitized to value what we've been seeing over and over and over again. And we almost can't see what's wrong anymore because we've been looking at it too long. And that's why we get help. That's why we get a critique, or that's why we turn it around. But look at your own artwork in a photograph. And guess what's even more a miracle? Look at your own artwork, put it in the computer, turn it into black and white, and posterize it. Whoa! Are you holding all your shadow patterns together? Are you holding all your lights together? It will like really tell you if like you are like kind of like, getting too choppy, or maybe like getting too much in areas that shouldn't be. So yeah, there's all different kinds of ways of like tricking our brains to like see things in a different way.
Yeah. Okay, I got to go back to something you said about Sargent. And just to get a clarification, so you had said that I don't remember if you said almost or does, throw out the halftones. Now, in my impression of Sargent is that he just makes them much closer together. Is that what
So
you
you
meant by that?
So what I mean by the halftone is I mean by that value that right where the light turns into shadow. Now, if you look at most of Sargent's work, he lights the model almost inevitably from the side. It's
Right,
most flat. So a lot of times it's direct side or it's like front side.
right.
So the whole face is being lit up. So in general, he makes the face very, very light. And then just along the very edge, there might be a little bit of a shadow pattern and just under here. But even those shadow patterns are high key in reality. And it's the background. It's what's surrounding it that is allowing the lights in the face to stay that light. You know, he doesn't paint light next to light. His backgrounds are not high key, and then the face is high key. It's like incredibly high key face, very high, usually, not always, but in general, usually the shadows because it's flattering. You know, how do you flatter someone? You don't give them harsh lighting. You give them side lighting. You take away all these little bumps and all this little information, these middle shapes.
Yeah, he was so good at flattering. I suck at flattering.
Well, and so, you know, half tones are those little transitions. So you might see them, or like sometimes, like you'd look at those paintings that he did of children, and they're really strong, and like he might have that beautiful red edge just on the side of the nose, but that's just one accent, and it's really small. So when you have high key or soft, you know, that like really high key lighting, the half tones become really tiny. It's when you
Right.
have the dramatic kind of chiaroscuro or spotlight lights that the halftones can be a little bit more bigger. And his halftones were so tiny because, you know, the light was right next to that bright red stroke, which was on the edge of that shadow. So he, you know, he was giving you these little color accents just on the edges. So
I feel like
that's
we
what
should pull up a Sargent painting, and I wish we could analyze a Sargent painting. Maybe that's for another episode, but this is good stuff. I really appreciate you clarifying that. Okay, let's pull up, let me see how to navigate your site here. I was looking at it before, but now okay. Oh gosh.
you can zoom in on this. See the bottom? You can click zoom.
Oh, okay, good, good. Oh, that's awesome. Nice feature. So
Well,
you had said that people have different skills or different innate aptitudes towards certain parts of art making. Some people are better at value, some people are better at proportion, some people are better at spatial sense. Two of the things that I think you are so good at, and I think you're great at drawing too, but I can't tell because you tell me you work so hard that you get it right.
Yeah.
So I can't tell whether it's easy or hard, but your sense of value, which we've kind of just talked about, and your sense of color are so subtle and so sophisticated. They're
Wow,
just
thank you.
very, oh my gosh. And one of the things I noticed when we were in Arizona at Scottsdale Artist School is how you take that principle of having the cool lights and warm shadows and you make it sing without overdoing it. Because I've seen it overdone and I've seen it not implemented terribly ambitiously or creatively. And then I've seen the way you do it, where it's just you make them sing. For example, when you look at the purples and violets right up against that yellow on the forehead. I can't point to it when it's zoomed in here. So I'll just kind of, we'll put the handle of the zoom thing. So we got this yellow next to this purple, all on the edge of that core shadow. I mean, complete complements right next to each other, and it just sings. You have a gift for that. That's one of the things I
Well,
love about your paintings.
I think that's why people like rim light or backlit is that first of all, just having that dark right next to those lights our eyes, I mean, I think are attracted to that. There is something about that contrast. And, you know, and I'm just going to admit it, like this painting took me a long time. So originally you get all just like the values and maybe kind of more neutrals. And then I mean, this painting, I had to keep pushing the light lighter. And it's like, it's fascinating. I'm going through a period right now where, like a painting like this, right? You start off pretty much on a white canvas.
Yeah.
So you're putting tones and washes, and then you're kind of putting in the shadows, and you're, and then I just could never get my lights as clean. So the last strokes of this painting were the very last lightest lights on that forehead and nose and cheek and finger, is because it was too dull for too long. And then it takes me to like the 11th hour to like kind of just do it. And because maybe I'm too wimpy, but I just decided that I'm going to go opposite now, because my bad habit is not getting clean enough lights. It's just not, I'm always having to fix my lights and my halftones. So I'm starting to only work on, or at least for a while, like black. So,
Black
I have,
canvas. A black canvas?
yeah. So
Really?
black
Have you
paper.
tried velvet? Have you tried painting Elvises on velvet?
I know. There's like a bad reputation, but I just know that, believe me, I mean, it is pretty exciting to have a black sheet of paper.
Yeah.
Or what I have been doing is working, because I've been doing a lot of sketches, so I've been working on that, like oil papers, like the arches or the Stonehenges, or things that, are meant to do oil on. And I will just do black, I'll just do black all over it. And then on top of that, or just literally black paper, where I will seal it with a clear, either gesso or something, and then just start to paint on that. There is something so electric and so satisfying to my inner being, that it's coming at it from the opposite. So it's taking my weakness, which is getting my lights light enough, and it's forcing me in that initial stroke to put down what is so hard for me to put down, and put it down in the beginning. And so I've been working on that, and I've been playing around with like color harmonies and just, different materials. Like, well, what is nice to paint on, and how can I work on different blacks, and what is what kind of offerings. And but it sounds weird. I get it. There's something like hidden in our
It's not
culture.
weird. It's not weird. I'm just teasing you.
No,
There
I
is a
get it.
question I have about it, though. This isn't, I understand that this isn't critical to a successful painting by any stretch, but I'm wondering what your feelings are about it. If you start with a black canvas, you're going to have to paint relatively opaque shadows in order to bring the shadows up to a higher key.
But it's amazing how, if you use a very, very strong color, like say, seriously, like something like a quinacridone rose, or even and you just scumble it right out of the tube, I mean, gorgeous, right there on black. You have some of the through. You don't have to make your shadows that. Now, Scott paints completely thick shadows, so he is like that person that, like, he doesn't play by those rules.
I know.
Now,
That's why I prefaced it by saying it's not critical. I'm just curious what your thought is on it.
no, but I'm not a naturally thick painter, so I am playing with the rules of thick and thin and all that stuff. So, but there is something that is pretty exciting, and so I mean, I could have done this exact painting, but just coming at it from a completely opposite. Instead of working on white and then adding dark, adding dark, adding dark, now I'm adding light, 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 and I find it a revelation.
Yeah.
That's the thing about being an artist, is that one thing will plant a seed. We see art on Instagram, or we somehow, well, it could be anything, a movie, a song, a book, a poem, anything that might all of a sudden just plant a word in your head, then like leads to something else, that leads to something else. And, we chose this career, this life path, to be like, yeah, that's what our job is to look for those threads, and then figure out what our voice is in that thread. And then, maybe with a strike of lightning, somehow, possibly, we will make something so beautiful that other people will go, why didn't I think of that? So there's always this idea. We see it with other people, like I was saying, like when we see something so beautiful, and I go, holy cow, they are tapped into that river of creativity that I just crave. I want to be in my intuition. I want to like know what it's like to feel the flow. And but every day, some days you have bad days, but it is just every day. You just keep searching for it. And I am all about like meditation. I'm all about prayer. I'm all about asking for guidance. I'm all about silence. You have to silence yourself. You
Mm-hmm.
have to set your mind. You have to take the time that you just don't have things spinning through to like even have a download, to even have something new pop in. And you can't keep shoving other people's like creativity down your throat. You can soak it up, but then you have to let it go for a while. And then you have to say, what can I take from all of this magic, and then sit and then be away from that stimulus. And it doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes it happens in days, weeks, months, but then you know that there is something that you go, you know what? I recognize it. I
Mm-hmm.
recognize this something. This was the answer to something that I asked for 3 months ago.
Mm. I love it. That's great. Okay, so I want to comment on these colors one more time, but I want to do it with a different work. Because I'm just enamored with your sensibility, color sensibility. Let's see what else. How do I get back to the actual let's see. Okay, here we go. This is what
Website
yeah,
redesigned.
yeah. Oh, your drawings. All right, we need to talk more about your drawings. But before we talk about your drawings, we have to pull up a cat because you are a cat lady.
Wait, oh my gosh, Annie. Oh, sorry. Here's Annie. Okay.
Oh, we did.
Both
I
my
gave
feet.
you full screen and then we didn't get to see your full screen. That's too bad.
Oh, well, that's okay. I can bring it back up. But yeah, Annie and Theo are right here because they have to be with you.
Oh man, I love it. I love your love for cats. It's great. Okay, and it's just gorgeous. So I think this is I don't know if you painted this back when we were in
Yeah,
Scottsdale.
I did.
You
So
did.
this was from a model with Tim Reese.
Yeah, I
So
have
yeah,
Tim
so
Reese's version of this. I bought it at the same time I
yeah,
bought
so
the painting I showed you. Yeah, it's gorgeous. Gorgeous. And then this is another good example. You seem to have a favorite palette when it comes to your highlights.
it
You
does. You know what? I think it's true. And I noticed that through my work too. So it's like, okay, so that's just a good question that I want to just say for a second is that for years, I was noticing that my color palettes was like similar. We all have habits. And then when I would look at a whole bunch of my paintings, either on the web or in folders or in front of me, I'm like, wow, my paintings are all turning really orange, really red. And so then I made a conscious choice of taking certain colors off of my palette and transferring them. And so now just recently I was like, you know what? I have been playing around with this color like too much. I had my fun with it. Now I'm going to play with some other colors. And so there are these things that we have to be flexible enough to go, all right, there is not a perfect flush. There is not a perfect highlight. There is not perfect anythings. Play with it, feel it out, work through it, and then move on and change it up. But I do think that, especially on a warm-skinned, person, having like, because he has these undertones of these olives and yellows and browns, then yeah, like the cool highlight, from the spotlight is going to have these sort of violets, these sort of blues, and sometimes they're more purple, sometimes they're more blue. And sometimes, it's like when they're really crisp and clean, you could use like a viridian, which can be so shocking, but that works so well. And I have been experimenting more with some of these luscious colors that the companies are making now.
when you say works so well, what it seems like to me is that they work in creating the illusion of the person, but not necessarily work at being an absolute correct documentation of reality. Because I mean,
Exactly.
I remember being there and I remember noticing they're not that violet, right? But you understand the principles of painting and you exaggerate them in such a way that it
Yeah.
enhances the portrait. It's,
Well, and also, right, you're trying what we're doing is we're creating an illusion. So we're trying to tell somebody something, and how do we depict it? So it's like, yeah, like transparency, we show air,
yeah,
thickness, we show light. How do we show something's going in the distance? There's all these things about edges and graying down. So we are trying to figure out how to do that. But with, a flesh, it just wouldn't look cool if I just added white to a brown. It
mm,
would look chalky. It wouldn't look in that temperature. So you do have to add the opposite, like the color wheel, right? If he has these yellow browns, you do have to add the opposite to create the illusion of a highlight. And I did have to go lighter than, unless to create even that illusion that there was a spotlight. Now, that's just my preference. Like somebody else, would have maybe could have been on it more subtle, or maybe it would have been just not as contrasted. But yeah, I was trying to play with like highlights, and I learned that from Richard Schmid, and I learned that from looking at his highlights. If you study his highlights, especially in still lifes, you will see how he, like on an apple, will put like cool blue or a cool red, and then like a warm red right on top of each other with those like, and he'll use those brushes that splay, right? Like the kind that get all, gnarly and like and splay out and have fingers and those and like a mongoose or a sable or something, and he'll just put it down like a little kitten lick, right? So he'll just like put it down and he'll have like the green underneath and then he'll have the pink going this direction, and he leaves them. So he doesn't smooth them out. So, I mean, you do this too. And
yeah.
so that when someone stands back, it's like sparkles. And, it's interesting because they don't know why it's sparkling, but it's sparkling because the artist put a red and green next to each other. And it's just that the values are the exact same values. So it works. And I remember him saying once, like, if you would look on a long stem of a rose, or you would look on a long, like, tree log, in one of his landscapes. Like if you, some of those paintings where he'd have a tree log going down on the beach, right? And you would look at the light value on the top of the tree log, and you would just see green and pink and yellow and blue, and then a little more green. And you would go, how does he do that? And it works because it's all the exact same value.
Right.
But he would say, why use the same color? Why not be more, wonderfulness? Why not be more brilliant? Why not give the spectacle of all these beautiful gems, but just as long as they're the same color? From far away, people can't tell. It's only when you get really close and you go, holy cow, look at that. Oh my God, look at all these little drags of like different colors, but they're the same value.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. I love it. That's good advice. All right, let's see what else you got here.
Well, if I would have known, I would have sent you images. I don't even know the last time I uploaded this.
I
I
know
have been
we all
determined to be
neglect our
better.
websites, right? It's
I'm going to be,
it's pretty bad how we neglect our websites. But
yeah.
maybe I could go to Instagram too. In fact, let's do that. Let's go to Instagram. Okay, here. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Some of these are just the simplicity of this. It's just incredible. I
Well, see,
love
and
how
that's
you simplified
pretty,
that eye socket.
well, and this is a small painting. So when I do things in my studio from life and you have like, the models, you have the model from 1 to 3 in the afternoon, but you have breaks. And so you think really painting time is actually maybe even less than 2.5 hours. And so I tend to paint relatively small for those time periods. This I think was only like a 10 by 10. And
Oh,
I always tend to do limited palette. So this was, I think, like a probably some magenta, purple with transparent oxide brown, and I think Viridian. And
Hmm.
so it's like I think no, maybe I don't know, maybe it was no, I wasn't using a blue. It is like, or maybe it was a blue, but I mean, I tend to choose just three. It's just me. I have a hard time with too many colors. So it's just doing a study. So sometimes if I have like a model one week, I'll go, well, today I'm going to use green and, brilliant pink and maybe, a neutral. Oh, and then this week, maybe I will try this, and, and it's all just the same face. It's the same light. It's the same, idea, but like choosing like, oh, what do I want to harmonies do I want?
Yeah.
Um,
Sound like James Gurney.
oh, okay. So
Yeah.
this
Are
is
you
exactly,
familiar with how he works? He's,
yeah.
yeah.
This
Yeah.
is just the idea of like the half tone is in the light. So those transitions like on her cheek or even on the side of her nose, just to me are like, nope, not gonna go there, not gonna like show too much saturation or too much form. Just yeah, like and you can keep it because I'm surrounding her face with a darker value, so then she can stay high key.
Hmm. One of the things I'd love you to comment on, which this displays extremely well, is your ability to make just these gorgeous descriptive edges. So, you've got in the forehead, it's so hard and crisp. And technically, one might say, well, that's an edge that turns, so we need to soften it up a little bit. But it works, and it works so beautifully. And then it's soft here at the bridge, and then really crisp and hard here, and then soft again. It's just really, really beautifully done. I wonder if you could comment on how your approach to edges, maybe some thoughts on edges.
I do think profiles are the perfect way to study edges and my favorite book. So anyone out there who doesn't know John Vanderpool's Drawing the Human Figure is just like my Bible. I
Oh, I
learned
don't know about
about,
that book.
well, you might have, and maybe like once you saw some images, you'd go, oh, okay. So
Okay.
he taught at the Art Institute of Chicago, the late 1800s, early 1900s, and he taught a lot of famous artists back then and illustrators. And he created this book that is just so beautiful. His drawings are like paintings, and it's more about mass than it is about line. And so he just would show these beautiful profiles. So to begin with, and maybe because I also saw Richard and Scott do profiles all the time, I never had that stigma about profiles. In fact, I love them too much. I have to force myself not to do them. And so profiles are this amazing, like this dance of line. And so to me though, the forehead, first of all, so it's like this is a tiny little painting, but within this tiny little painting is a microcosm of like where I want people to look. And I want people to look at just that little area of the eye, just this little area of the forehead, eye, and nose. So the
Mm-hmm.
hair, chin, everything else is just secondary. So yeah, so within that small little box of that little thing I want people to look at, there's going to be the hierarchy of edges. So bone, so I always tell people, well, look for where bone is. Bone, you can have a harder edge. And cartilage or where something turns softer, you can have a softer edge. Okay, so that's just general. But then obviously the light is coming from above and front. So where does the light hit the closest? So those are like, okay, where's that sharpest edge going to be? So I'm telling the viewer that this is ground zero. This is like number one. Light is hitting here. Light, this is bone. So let's start off here. And then everything else is diminished and is like secondary. Like, it's like, okay, this is less important. These are supporting. So, and then anything that's turning under. So like if the light is coming from above, anything that's turning away from the light can be soft. So
Mm-hmm.
right
Look
eyebrow
at
and the
that.
brow.
Yeah. Yeah, right here.
And the,
Really soft on the under the lip, really soft under the chin.
Yeah, and I push it for sure, but but I'm thinking of these as like haikus, right?
Right.
So I'm not a super fast painter. So I'm thinking, what can I get done in this amount of time with, when you're painting in a group, so there's always like distraction. There is, you're all, whatever, it's like, I don't want to like make things hard for myself. So I limit my palette, I limit my idea. I'm limiting everything, and then I'm limiting even more within this and just focusing on like the eye and the nose. And the
Mm.
mouth is secondary. I always do the mouth very last. And yeah, so I don't even think about like hair or, and all that stuff. And even the design within the eye, I'm like, that's the least important. I would never go in there. I mean, that's a gift. That eye shape is so beautiful.
Says
And so
everything it
that's,
needs to say.
yeah, and that's why when you look at the John Vanderpool book, he taught me that. He taught me how to create that one puzzle piece, to create that eye shape and the angles of it and how beautiful geometry it is. So, yeah, I don't want to go in there and show more. Yeah.
This is one of the most difficult things I find to teach, and that is getting students to just put down the dark shape instead of
Hmm.
drawing a pupil and an
Hmm.
iris and the rim of the flesh around the eye and so on and so forth, just to put down the dark shape. It's really hard, I find, to get students to do that. And you've illustrated or demonstrated it very well. It's incredibly well.
Well, and when I was in school, I would do little copies from John Vanderpool's book, and I tell people when they're starting out to draw to just think of it as meditations and like someone doing piano scales.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you're doing anything, when you're watching TV, when anything, take out the book, take a little sketch, and just copy his because he's editing it and showing you these beautiful little shapes, and just try and get the muscle memory understanding how that shape goes into that shape. And you do it
Mm-hmm.
over and over again. Another thing that I teach is that you don't do it one and done. It is like you might do 6 of these eyes across your paper and you just keep doing it till it's so sunk in that you're like, oh right. So the next time I do a profile, I can understand that, yeah, okay, yeah. It's like I can understand how one shape goes right into another shape. And then I
Hmm.
also tell people the best way to force yourself not to do details is to give yourself that idea of doing like a demo, meaning like you give yourself like a really good photo or an apple, it could be a still life or anything, and you get it all set. You put a timer for an hour and you say, I'm going to do these little block-ins. And obviously, I'm not going to go to a small brush. So, what can I get done? What can I get this done in an hour? And then an hour's done and you can't touch it again. It's like it's an electric, it's like a 50-yard dash, there's just an adrenaline of how to simplify. And it's a muscle. You have to train yourself. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
going to, if you're not used to doing it, it's going to be difficult and you're going to
Hmm.
fight it. But it's like, how much are you willing to like keep doing it?
Yeah. That sounds like a really helpful exercise. Okay, so I just want to find one of your. Oh, there it is. Found it. These, I'm assuming this is a new pastel.
But yeah, this was probably done with Conte of Paris pastel pencil, new pastels. Yeah, I use a lot of like the Conte of Paris new pastel, especially back then when I did this one. Yeah, this was
Go
done on real
again. The
paper.
edges, the edges are just so beautiful. And then
Well, thank
artists are such nerds. The edges, the edges. Like, it's like who cares in in the grand scheme of things in the world. But it's for me, it's eye candy with this beautiful sharp edge right under the chin here. How you soften the eyes, and then your subtle turning of forms in the face. This is one of my favorite drawing mediums that you do. I love these drawings. They're just,
yeah, it really did lend itself. I mean, because like I was saying, like everybody has something that they love to do, and I love the tactileness of chalk and pastel. I love the feeling of rubbing. So there was a time years ago when, like all of us, we go through things, and I was going through some illness, and so I just wasn't able to paint really. And so when you're sick a lot or you're not feeling well, I would just say, "But I just want to do something. I just want to do something. I don't want to just sit around anymore." So, I'd be sitting on my couch and I would be watching TV, and I'd be like, well, at least I could draw. So I could have some paper on my lap, and I would just take like a sepia chalk, because I always loved old photos. So I loved that idea of those like old photos, that kind of things were disappearing, and they looked, like falling, kind of edges were kind of falling away. And so I just would start on this doing it, and I would rub, because I just loved it. I don't know, there was something about it. It doesn't come natural to people, right? So I'm rubbing, and then I would try different papers. And when I found this paper, which is a printmaking paper, Reeves BFK, or printmaking paper, it's a thick, soft paper that the more you rubbed it, the better it got. Whereas
Really?
some papers are, papers feel differently. There's coarse papers, hot press. There's some papers that are very just flat, and you rub it and it doesn't do much, and maybe it smooths it out. But this paper, the more you rubbed, it rubbed into it. So, because it was
Hmm.
like a soft paper, so it was kind of, you were rubbing it into the layer, which then helps with this sort of ghosting effect, meaning parts of it, you see on the edge and near the left cheek where her shoulder is just disappearing. Well, you only get that because the paper is part, as you keep rubbing it, it's like going into the paper. And,
Hmm.
and then, so materials do lend itself to kind of leading you in a certain way. Now, Scott doesn't want to draw this way. He would never draw this way. If you gave him this paper, his drawings would look completely different. So if anybody gets anything from this, it is the fact of, it's wonderful to be uniquely yourself, and everyone will find whatever it is that will be like, it will just click, right? You'll just
Right.
find something, and yeah.
Yeah. Doesn't that paper, I feel like I've tried that paper before. Doesn't it kind of have like get kind of pills building up if you rub it too much?
Sure.
It does?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So it is the same paper. Yeah.
Well, and there's different weights. So in most papers, like you could get like the thinner weight, like the 180, and then I think it goes up to 280. And so I would always get like whenever I work on paper, I always get the heaviest,
Yeah.
because I tend to be a little bit manipulate it. So and there's, even on that paper, there is a front and back. So I tended to work on what you might consider the back, which is the side with the imprint, with that embossing.
Okay.
And everybody's different, like I just looked at somebody's drawing who worked on that really pebbly, bumpy pastel paper. And, and I would always shy away from that.
Like the
I would always work.
sandpaper type stuff?
Like there's pastel paper that has sort of a texture on one side and it's very smooth on the other. And
Yeah.
then when you do drawing, you shows bumps, right?
Right.
But I would always have chosen the other side. Well, they chose the bumpy side, and it just is it's okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just a different look. Yeah.
Yeah. Because that whole pilly quality where the paper would sort of peel off a little bit drove me nuts. That's why I'm asking.
How would you
We're all
rub it,
different. Well, I don't
though? How did you?
remember. I don't, probably with a stump, probably with a paper stump. Are you using your fingers?
Well, I would first use my finger, but I would majority, and I would even use a brush too, but a majority, I would use a Viva paper towel.
Oh, maybe that's
Viva
the
paper
difference.
towel is like my favorite tool of all time, because once you can make it into a little ghost and you can use it or you can kind of rub it, but then once you actually get material on the Viva, I start using that as a drawing tool, and that then creates a wide kind of soft kind of effect. But I would use those stumps, but I would tend to use the stumps that aren't the turning ones, like the tortillions, just the ones that are just paper.
Yeah.
And I I would use those probably in those little areas of like the eyes or something. But but I
They
think
might
my
just be
finger,
too aggressive for the big areas. That's probably why I was having that problem. Yeah. Well, you're working magic on that paper. Congrats. It's so beautiful. Okay, so my last question for you
okay?
is what advice would you give an aspiring young artist? What's one piece of advice? You've already given so much great advice, but what's one piece of advice we haven't already talked about?
Well,
Or
I
old
mean,
artists,
I
doesn't have to be young. Aspiring
yeah,
artists.
I feel like a lot of like nowadays, it's great that we have social media. When I was coming up, there wasn't social media, everything, where everyone was so separated. So now we can connect. I think, there are so many. Okay, so no matter where you live, even if you are isolated, you now have the ability to reach out and connect with artists that inspire you. So I do feel that trying to paint with people that you admire, either by taking classes or just becoming, just like connecting with them. And I feel like I'm so willing, to give advice, or if people start connecting with me through messaging or commenting on my work. You start a relationship, but then you also it's like, I guess so that, try as much as possible to, I guess, reach out to people that you really admire, but then, um, I don't know. Is that good advice, Jeff? Like, are you
That's a
willing
crazy
to?
good advice. In fact, that while you're talking, I'm thinking, yeah, this goes to show how lousy character I have. But I have to admit, I have a little bit of resentment toward people who are 20 years younger than me. Because it's like I remember being in Salt Lake, going to a lousy art department. I mean, I had some good teachers. I'm not saying that everything I had was not good, but
Mhm,
and I think what would it be like to be learning art
mhm,
today where you could access Susan Lyon on your laptop and literally talk to her face to face on your laptop? Like I can't
mhm.
even imagine. In Salt Lake City 20 years ago, there was almost nothing. There was nothing except Barnes and Noble and a couple books of some obscure painters. It's such a great
Is
time.
I agree with you. It is a great time, and I am feeling a change in the air. I mean, for me too, like I am just, there is something I know wonderful is going to happen, and I feel like it's just about to happen. I just know it. So I do feel like don't be scared to reach out. I think a lot of artists are willing to mentor, or there's online classes, or even just, getting advice one-on-one, simple little questions like when you comment on a post. Like you can create a relationship with someone that you admire by just being very supportive. I mean, if I saw somebody who was like just the kindest person and who would just say sweet things and just be like, just tell me that, there, of course, I'm going to be like, well, sure. What can I, you have a question? Okay. So there is this idea of just being open and not being too scared. We're all human, we all love connection. So don't be scared to do that. I do think somehow if you can get in, you know, paint with others that are better than you, or at least join a group. I do think that it's very hard to become excellent when you're all by yourself. I mean, there's miracles happen, but it's like somehow if you can get out of and you just paint with other people, the level raises. There is something about energetic, and people are all trying to, like get better at the same time. I think it does help each other. Um, I don't know. Yeah, I mean,
Well, and even if you are
yeah,
the best one in the class or in the group,
yeah, just
everyone, even a sixth grader, is going to have something to teach you. That's one thing that I've
right.
learned throughout my career is I learn from my students all the time. I learn from artists who have less experience than me all the time.
Mhm.
There's, even if you are an exceptional painter, there's something you don't know that someone else knows, and you don't know who
Exactly.
that person's going to be. So it's always, I agree with you. It's beneficial to be around people regardless of where you stand in the pecking order.
Yeah, and then nowadays, if you can't travel, there are so many online groups that are even free. You don't
Yeah.
have to pay. There's so much stuff on YouTube. There's so much stuff on Facebook. Just be that person that also reaches out and is supportive of others, and it will come back. I mean, sometimes I feel like we can feel very lonely, like if we're by ourselves and, like, oh, well, I just don't have opportunities. Well, be that person that brightens somebody else's day. And you never know, like, what great connection or friendship you'll make, even just online so much. So don't be scared to like message somebody and just, say something beautiful to them. And
Hmm.
I just feel like it will never go wrong. And you never know what will happen from it. But yeah, I mean, I just think it's so much better now than when we had it, right?
Oh
Especially me,
man,
I'm older
yeah.
than you. So it's, I know.
Yeah. Well, Susan Lyon, this has been awesome. It's so great to get to know you better after all these years. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Well, should we promote that we're going to do a demo and everyone come to the
Yes.
Portrait
Come to the Porch
next April?
Society. And I'm hoping to get the Porch Society actually on the show to talk about who the faculty is soon. So we'll be hopefully be announcing that soon. But yeah, come see you and I paint at the Porch Society of America. It's going to be a blast. I can't wait to see you
Yeah.
there next spring.
No, it is the best conference.
It really is.
It,
Although I
it,
haven't been to
I,
that many others, I'm sort of like, I just have this weird loyalty toward the Porch Society of America. Like that's my conference kind of
well, and
thing.
I've been to a lot of them, so let me tell you. And it is just joyful. And I think people go there by themselves and they leave making great friends
Hmm.
because other people will go there by themselves. And it's, I don't know, like I'm getting goosebumps even a little bit because I remember when Scott and I were first asked, and I don't even know what year it was, but it was kind of before they started to get really big. And they had asked Scott and me to come do like a lecture and Scott to do a demo. And in all honesty, we never even really heard of the Portrait Society before. It was mainly just for portrait commission people.
Hmm.
It was not like this huge thing that it was. So it was a small subgroup that we knew nothing about. And so in our mind, we're like, oh, okay, so we got to drive there, spend all day driving there, and we got to do this. And it was like we were really weighing it. Like, is this even okay? I mean, like, is it worth it? And when we went, our minds were blown. And I have never ever, I tell people that story because I just was a little bit of a skeptic. Like, is this really going to be worth it for us? And then just the energy and the people that I've met and the connections and all the art, people from all over the world. So I should be their promoter, I guess. But I mean, it's
Same.
just,
Yeah.
I really feel that it is a great energy and very friendly, like very inclusive, right?
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
it doesn't seem clicky to me. Like you go in, you can talk and sit down to someone you've never met and sit there for 4 hours and it's really like that.
Yeah. You don't want to sleep for 4 days. You just hang out in the hotel lobby all night, every night. Yeah. Although you and I probably should sleep at least one night. I think we're doing it in the morning,
I
right?
just sleep Friday night
Yeah.
because
Friday
Saturday
night.
was
Friday night. All right. Well, thanks again, Susan. We'll see you next spring. Thanks for tuning in to the Undraped Artist Podcast. If you enjoyed it, subscribe. And if you could, leave a comment or review. That really helps the channel. Please share the show with your friends. And if you're feeling generous, consider a monthly donation at theundrapedartist.com. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next week.